today is a day of effort. You've all paid high fees to join us, and now you have to spend the morning thinking of questions. It's going to be a successful day if we all participate. I only beg of you to do this as I am the winning moderator. Successful moderators only have to ask 2 questions, and the rest of you do the rest of my job. So keep in mind, it is a point of discussion day. It's an exciting topic. I want to thank every one of you for taking time. I'd like to thank our key sponsor today. I want to thank the hard volunteers of the South African Council of Shopping Centres Committee that give of their time freely to organise, to facilitate, and most of all to print these very difficult name labels. If you don't have one, we apologise. If your name is spelt wrong, go with it. The rest of the day will get easier. If you wake up in this beautiful city of ours, you need to be reminded that you're blessed of one of the 8% of people living in Cape Town. If you're having this conference in Joburg today, they're not as happy, I can promise you. We have our challenges, but we're blessed. We are all reminded of this because half the people that work with us are still doing jobs in Joburg, but now sit and live in Cape Town. There's an overwhelming sense of change in our city. We talk about things like migration. We talk about the scale of our city. Many of you talk about how hard it is to get your child into a school, and we see the traffic, and we live with the reality of a blossoming city in a country that's possibly having one of its toughest broader macroeconomic environments to deal with. And here we sit feasting and having fun on the brink of a big election. So with so much in mind in our world and so much to look forward to, we certainly live in the epicenter of what promises to be a city, and long may it last, of bloom and growth. We're always reminded of the inequalities and the strong challenge and urge to be able to create an equitable platform for all of us to enjoy this city. But when we discussed this topic, it was one that brought to mind many questions. Questions about sustainability. Is it here to last? Are we 4 years behind Joburg? Are we in a space that's going to produce growth and an administration that facilitates growth? And that brought us to the sudden realization that no one in the committee knew much about it other than the general dining room conversation, and we managed to rustle up some very astute, knowledgeable, and well-guided guest speakers. And I'm grateful for your attendance, and I'll leave the introduction of these people to my colleague Amanda. Thanks again for coming, and I'm sorry about this mic, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Without much ado, again, just a thanks for setting the time. This is a huge turnout. It's great to see the support. It's clear that this industry is one of connection and joy. We like to be together. We like to share ideas, and I hope you participate on that note. So I would like to introduce and ask you to give a round of applause to our sponsor of the day, Crazy Store. Go for it. I think without sponsorship, these events are very difficult to get going. A big and warm welcome to Kevin Leonard, the Managing Director of Crazy Store, I believe since 2012, somewhere there, and his team that's joined him here today. This sponsorship is vital for us. Crazy Store, as all of you know, a leading discount retail variety store, and they are everywhere. I think they've topped over around about 500 stores. It's proud as a South African to be associated with a successful story of retail throughout our country. So we're going to play an introductory video, and on that basis we will then get Kevin up to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Since we started in 1997, we have grown to one of the largest discount variety retailers in Southern Africa, offering great value and a wide range of products. What started as a handful of value stores has become a beloved brand with hundreds of locations across South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana. We are big on value and even bigger on range. We have warehouse space in Cape Town, Durban, Gqeberha, and Johannesburg, covering over 60,000 square meters. For us, offering surprisingly more for less is the norm, even with our range of well-known brands. We are on a quest to continually grow and improve our product offering, placing importance on understanding our customers. Our shelves are filled with products based on customer feedback, requests, and of course, their shopping patterns. We want to go the extra mile for our customers and delight them with an extensive product range while delivering 5-star customer service. Our staff is key to the success. The Crazy Store has a quality promise to all our customers. We stand by our products, so if there's a problem, consider it sorted. With thousands of products, the Crazy Store really does have something for everyone. Because hey, you never know what you might find.
Thanks, Kevin.
Morning everybody. As Gavin's kindly introduced me, I'm Kevin Leonard. I'm the Managing Director of the Crazy Store. And it's our privilege to, as Gavin said, to sponsor this morning's breakfast. Gail Momsen, our Property Director, came to me at the beginning of the year and said she felt that we should get more involved with SACSC and maybe sponsor some events, not just in Cape Town, but in Joburg and wherever the events might come up. And much of the reason for doing that is that there are very few bodies in South Africa that actually bring retailers into the fold, let alone bodies such as a shopping centre body, a landlord body, a developer's body. And it's important that we all spend time together and work together. You know, the history of retail and landlords is an interesting one. And there have been rocky roads and we all talk about it. But you know, one of the things we learned from COVID and post-COVID is the importance to collaborate and work together. I think gone are the days where you have somebody who's so dominant that they can smash out a deal that only suits one party. We really need each other more than ever at the moment, and I think the collaboration between all of us, and not just between retailers and landlords, but between retailers and retailers. We're such a suspicious lot in this country, worrying about what the other retailer's doing and not sharing knowledge and secrets, and I think we really need to work together. So that's the reason we decided to get more involved, because this is the one body that brings us all together, and SACSC do an amazing job. So to them, thank you, and we're really chuffed to be able to help out, and we look forward to doing many events in the future. And apparently, because we're a destination store, that's why so many of you have come out today. From a Crazy Store perspective, Gavin took a bit of my thunder, but yeah, we're 491 stores. May is a busy month for us. We've just opened 3 stores, and we're opening another 5 this month. So we'll be opening 8 stores. I nearly got the maths wrong. We'll be opening 8 stores in May, which will take us to 496 stores by the end of this month. So we're rapidly approaching the really big milestone for us of 500 stores. And assuming there are no landlord beneficial occupational delays in June, will be 500 stores by the end of June, which we're really, really chuffed about. Thank you, that was unexpected. We have built the business on just, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but 2 really big factors, and one is good old-fashioned 5-star service. It's a big premise for our business that we focus on, and the second angle did pop up on the screen quickly there today was our quality promise. As a consumer, I find that retailers don't trust me anymore. I take items back and there's a million rules, and normally I've got 7 days, otherwise if I bring it back 7 days and 2 hours later I'll be chucked out the store, maybe even arrested, I'm not sure, but they don't seem to trust me. So we've made a big premise around the fact that if you're unhappy with the products you purchase from us for whatever reason, please bring it back. We'll either refund you or exchange you. Now, I'm not encouraging it, but in December, we had a customer bring back 3 boogie boards that he'd bought a year ago and said they haven't lasted as well as he wanted. Every customer care complaint comes through me and our Rena, our marketing director, and several others. We refunded him his money, simply because that's what we stand for. And I think if our customers trust you, and we can trust them, again, you've got a working relationship. It's a little bit what I was talking about, our collaboration at the beginning. So I think that's made a big difference to us. And going forward, we hopefully will continue to build on that premise. Just if you can indulge me shortly, I know this morning is about the Western Cape. But one of the great privileges of my job is traveling around this country, be it going to Thohoyandou or Priska or Schweizer Rheinecker or Struisbaai or Hoedspruit or Beaufort West. There are two things that stand out, and it's the same word for both. We've got a beautiful country and beautiful people in our country. Wherever I go, I look at our amazing staff and I look at the amazing people that serve us. You know, people got here this morning way before we would have got here to set up this function for us, and everyone always seems to do it with such a smile and with such energy and passion. And I think our country is an amazing country. I'm a huge believer in South Africa and a huge believer in the future of our country, let alone the Western Cape. As far as the Western Cape's concerned, we've got 125 stores in the Western Cape, so that's 25% of our store turnover, which is actually rather high. What I can add to our speakers today, of maybe some small note, is that our Western Cape stores are consistently over the last 3 years outperforming the rest of the country from a growth perspective, and consistently so. So clearly there's something special happening in the Western Cape, as we all know, and I guess we're going to learn why and will it be sustainable or not. So I think that's enough from me. To all of you, thank you for everything you do to create this great industry that we all have to operate in, and enjoy your morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin and Gavin. Welcome, everyone. Firstly, wow, what a stellar turnout for a discussion that promises to be insightful and is clearly in all of our hearts. We're all invested in this beautiful province in some shape or form. So the allure of the Cape, our topic this morning. So we've all read or discussed, the headlines such as Cape Town or the coastal towns of the Cape being first choice for semigrants. There's even statisticians and economists predicting that Cape Town is set to be the next epicenter for South Africa as early as 2030. We're 15 days away from the next national election, and there are big questions being asked about, are the gains of this province sustainable? Can it continue to attract the investment and people? And there are even some parties who are questioning who should be even allowed. Now, we're not going to unpack the politics of it this morning, but I think we are all here to understand the how's it going in the province and the where and the why of this multifaceted province. So I'm very excited to be introducing our three panelists this morning, all here to share their insights from their industry perspective. First off, each will give a short presentation, followed by a panel discussion, which Gavin will moderate, but mostly we really want to hear from everyone on the floor. So first up, we have Janine Bertha, who is the head of research for Westgrow. Now, Westgrow, which I hope everyone is aware of, is the province's official tourism, trade, and investment partner. And she will speak to Westgrow's contributions, impact, and future plans within the province. Second up, we'll have Aileen Rodell, who's the CEO of Retake Solutions, which is an innovative real estate management platform. And she'll be sharing with us her insights and stats and trends around semigration and the province. And then last but not least, we have Alex Kabelin, who's the retail executive for the VN Waterfront, who will be sharing the waterfront as a case study of its economic contribution and impact from a retail and tourism perspective. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road, and I welcome Janine.
Good morning, everyone. Hi. It's lovely to be in such an energized room. I mean, it's not my normal audience. It's usually a lot more staid and somber. So it's a great pleasure to be with you all. And thank you to Gavin and to Amanda for inviting us and for sharing the opportunity that I can actually share some insights about the Western Cape, specifically about Westgrow in terms of what we do and our thoughts as to what the province does hold. And I think that very much is top of mind in terms of the opportunities that do actually present still as well. Alrighty. Westgrow, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're 42 years old this year. We are the official trade, investment and tourism promotion agency for the Western Cape. We pride ourselves in being at the nexus between the public and the private sector. We have a very strong private sector focused board, but we are funded predominantly by the public sector. And our objective really is, and our mandate, because we are mandated, is to, in collaboration with our key stakeholders, enable sustainable economic growth and ultimately job creation. And that really is through a strong collaboration. And ultimately, in today, we need to be a globally competitive regional economy. Why? Because no longer is investment limited by geographic borders. We think about services, we think about various forms of investment which can actually be invested globally, and it's no longer, we need to be able to claim our share of the pie, and the pie is global. So we really do aspire to be a regional centre and an economy of excellence on a global platform as well, though. So there are many of us within, no, there aren't many of us. We are about 100 people in total. There are many units, and we really have a strong focus on investment, on attracting investment into the province, as well as extending the footprint of investors onto the continent. We also have a very strong focus on exports, and the creative industries is a big focus as well. Exports being a key objective in terms of bolstering foreign exchange earnings and so forth as well, and certainly ultimately to increase the GVA of the economy as well, though. I don't want to say too much. This was our last year, shows where we've been and who's come in towards us. 93 outward missions globally last year, 63 inward missions, and a whole lot of delegations coming through our offices. We have a lot of interest from the Middle East at the moment, which certainly is a target market for us. Largely unserved, as you all know, for those of you who travel extensively. That is on our radar in terms of trying to create airlift, but that is something which lies ahead of us. But really, we pride ourselves in taking the Western Cape to the world and bringing the world to the Western Cape as well, though. Strategic priorities. Never before has it been as relevant to be relevant. You know, in terms of, and what are we talking about? We're talking about sustainability. We're talking about net zero. We're talking about the green transition. We're talking about being able to ensure that investment lands in such a way that it is sustainable. And sustainable is across many, many facets. We think about the green transition, which is very much first and foremost on our platform. My CEO is actually in Rotterdam at the moment at a green hydrogen conference. So we really do try to keep abreast of what is going to keep us relevant going forward. And it's not about being relevant now, it's about having that vision in terms of 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. We're always tasked with doing headlines in team efforts of give us a headline from 2050. And it's funny to see what comes out, but not all of it is irrelevant, you know, so it's kind of like paint your wildest dream, and a lot of it is probably going to manifest. In terms of, these are just a couple of our real focus points at the moment in terms of where we're going. The ones that really stick out in terms of the green transition is one. Tourism is a big one. It's part of the G4J. For those of you who aren't familiar, Growth for Jobs is the provincial government's flagship project at the moment in terms of actually enabling breakout growth, and it is going to be a partnership between private and public sector. So they're quite some people say audacious goals. We like to say ambitious goals in terms of what they're aspiring to do. But if we are going to continue growing as a province, we need to set ourselves apart in terms of how we do it. Notwithstanding the restrictions we do have, we're all impacted by logistics, we're all impacted by energy. Energy is going to resolve itself eventually. We have greater problems with water staring at us at the moment as well, though. That's really where we're heading. Very briefly, it's a bit of our brag book. We had 178 million in funding last year, and this is some of the achievements we had. 7.75 billion in new investments facilitated through Westgrow, 6.8 billion export declarations, and so it goes on. You know, so we're very active, and it's all about creating and enabling an environment which facilitates job creation, sustainable job creation. Equality is very much in terms of one of our key objectives as well, though, and in terms of growing the province. And I say the province because we don't just focus on Cape Town. We have a broader mandate to actually, it's inclusive of the Western Cape as well. And Kevin, I mean, we're aware of all the crazy stores that have actually footprints around the province as well, though. Okay, that just speaks to where we're actually active. So it's not just the province, not just Cape Town. We certainly do try and we're seeing, it's interesting, we've seen a shift specifically in kind of the future fit industries, the likes of renewables and so forth. I mean, you don't have to drive very far to see the extensive investment in the province in terms of energy focused investments. I'm not going to say too much about this, but this is interesting. In terms of, if you think about the Western Cape economy, not many people think about services, but we are largely services driven. Over 75% of our GVA in the economy is from the services sector, and we have some really strong sectors in there, of which finance, real estate, and business services dominates. For those of you who do or don't know, I mean, the BPO sector, the business processing, outsourcing sectors, call centers, we are considered to be global, very globally competitive. And I mean, I was at in a conversation recently, and I think we're almost close to having 500 BPO centers in the city. That's enormous, and with that, the employment and the absorption of not necessarily very skilled people, but it is really creating huge opportunities from an employment perspective. So that's really the layout in terms of the contributions, largely tertiary sector focused, which incorporates most of the services sector, and equally the services sector / tertiary sector, which is in the green sector, largest employer of source of employment. Over 70% of employment in the Western Cape is in the services sector as well. Very boring, okay. But this is something which I think it always just shows how the Western Cape currently stacks up. Why are we still looking at 2022 data? Because it's World Bank data and they haven't released 2023 data. But if you look at the Western Cape, all around us, Western Cape's down, it's about 6 from the bottom. Every other bar line is a country. So we are a province comparing to countries in terms of GDP value as well, though. And a lot of those countries are commodity rich. So they don't really have a diversified economy, but it really shows how we stack up and why there is this interest in their economy as well. Similarly with GDP, and that speaks more to your industry in terms of the power of the consumption of the consumer. Look at where we are. We're ahead of South Africa as well, though. And once again, Seychelles is different, but Mauritius is largely tourism and small populations. Libya, largely oil or commodities. Botswana, diamonds, Gabon, etc., etc. Largely commodities rich. It is just indicative of the diversity of our economic basket as well, though, which is good in terms of being less reliant on something which is not sustainable. It is what it is. Growth for the entire country is very, very subdued at the moment. There are a number of factors which are beyond the province's control, and I touched briefly on them. Logistics remains a huge challenge. Infrastructure remains a huge challenge. You don't have to look too far to see what's going on in Johannesburg in terms of water, etc., etc. There's generally there's been a lack of maintenance across many key infrastructural assets, which really are proven to be crippling now. This picture, so historically the Western Cape's growth has tended to track national, so there's never really been a huge divergence from it, and this is the reason why the Growth for Jobs initiative has been undertaken by the Western Cape government. We recognise we're restricted in terms of policy, etc., etc., but what is it that we can do differently to set ourselves apart? And that's where G4J comes from. It's huge. I mean, they want a R1 trillion economy by 2035. That's what we're aspiring to, tripling exports by 2035, investment 200 billion by 2035. So there's lots of huge milestones, and we're all really, really hard at it. It's been filtered into every single thing that most government or agencies are actually working towards. But it is going to be a collaboration. The Western Cape government has committed to creating the enabling environment for the private sector to participate. So it really is a collaboration. It is going to require all sorts of buy-ins and that, but it certainly is underway as well at the moment, though. But this fundamentally is something which is going to hopefully set us apart from the rest of the country as well, though. All right, foreign direct investment trends. I'm very mindful of time. I'm expecting the orchestra to start playing quite soon. The FDI, we're still seeing strong FDI flows. We've seen a very strong influx over the past 24 months into renewables, and that's that sharp uptick that we have seen in 2023 last year. We saw one company invest close on 40 billion last year in renewable energy, and that's why there's kind of that little exception going up as well, though. So, but we're still seeing strong foreign direct investment coming into the province and the city, and it's quite, with the exception of the renewables we saw last year, it's quite diverse. We're seeing a lot into, this is just the point from last year I wanted to share. If you look at 2022, and we like to call communications, business services, software and IT services kind of future fit sectors. Those are the ones which really you need to be, if you're not up there right now, if you're not seeing investment in those sectors, you're going to be left behind, because that is where a lot of the future lies in terms of tech. And tech is very broad, very diverse. And so we want to be seeing this. So we're very much on the global radar in terms of those sectors. Last year, renewable energy, there's opportunity for investors here. And I was lucky enough to be in the crew last weekend. It's a bit of an eyesore. There are just wind turbines everywhere, in the most remote places. But it's almost like choose your poison, because it is enabling, it's enabling energy for us as well, though, and affordable energy as well, though, which I think we underestimate the benefit of. Future economies, like I said, this is just looking back over the past 10 years. We look at by the number of projects. You never want to find yourself in a position where you've got one huge FDI project, because there's risk. I mean, then all your eggs are in one little basket. So we always measure by CapEx as well. So renewable energy, you've seen the big one, but if you excluded the 40 billion from last year, it comes right down. Communications, business services, software and IT, really strong leaders in terms of that. And yes, we've had all the big ones, all those big American companies who've come in and are doing all sorts of wonderful building in OBS. So, but there's a very, very strong focus. There is an exceptionally talented tech environment and ecosystem in the Western Cape. For those of you who are interested, go and read up the source or the origins of Amazon and where their tech team came from. A lot of them came out of Cape Town originally. So there's a tremendous between Stellenbosch, Cape Town, Somerset West. There's a huge amount of intellectual capital that sits in that space. So never to be underestimated. And it's not just tech. There are various aspects of tech. Traditional markets in terms of projects and capex. We call traditional markets the US, the UK, Germany, etc., etc. So those have long been traditional markets of ours as well, and are likely to continue. This is always interesting in terms of, and possibly speaks to some of your interests in terms of the top 15 projects by capex over the last 10 years as well, though. And somewhere over there, I've got the wrong glasses on. Sorry, guys. Yeah. There is a lot of them, as you can see, speaks to renewables, but we've had agri-processing, we've got a lot of communications, and we've had some HQs coming in as well, headquarters in terms of businesses either looking to headquarter for the South African market or moving up into the African continent as well, which we do see an increasing amount of interest in. Very briefly, tourism trends, and I think this is very much what you're all interested in. I just wanted to show the growth that we're seeing in tourism, both domestically, and domestically I'm referring to the province, and nationally as well. We saw last year a 37.5% increase in visitors to the Western Cape. That's enormous. And this is not just by air, this is total tourists to the Western, international tourists to the Western Cape. And then from a domestic tourist, also an increase. For those of you, I think COVID seems like a distant memory, but it was less than 24 months ago. We were all still wearing masks, I think. But you think about the power of the domestic tourist, which really kept many institutions going, and institutions in your smaller towns. And also, I think that reinforced the importance of never underestimating the domestic tourist and the domestic consumer as well. And certainly that has been something which has come out very strongly post-COVID. South Africa also a phenomenal increase in tourism over the past 24 months or into 2023. This speaks to 2022. It's the Western Cape's 2023 data has been made available by SAT, but there was a bit of a glitch on our side. So this is our largest tourism markets. Once again, it's your traditional markets. It is the UK. One of my following slides speaks to the air routes and the airlift that we have between these regions as well, so it's no surprise. The US is a market which has really come on board in recent years, and that's thanks largely to the direct flights which we have seen and continue to see. So that's always an interesting and point of discussion for us as well in terms of, are we targeting the correct markets as well, though? And also interesting to see, which all of you who are in Cape Town, when you see the cruise ships coming in as well, though, to see how that shifts too. Africa is an important market for us. Also 2022 data, almost 215,000 African tourists or visitors into the province as well, 2.6 billion rands worth of spend. They're a powerful market, and they're also a key focus of ours as well, though. Often it's a different kind of tourism experience that they're looking for, but it is nonetheless, it is a key focus of Westpro as well. We have a very, very strong Africa desk who has a very strong network on the continent as well, and they're always traveling. 2023 market data for the Western Province. We've seen an uptick foreign direct spend in the Western Cape. I mean, it's a significant jump, 17 billion to almost 24 billion. Similarly, total bed nights, we've gone up from 13.7 to 16.3. Length of stay slightly down on what we saw pre-COVID, but nonetheless still very good. Domestic spend, also an increase in terms of the spend from 12.7 billion to 14.8 billion, and domestic trips continues to increase as well, though. Very briefly, I want to touch on air access. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a collaboration started in 2015 between a number of partners, private sector and public sector. There were various reasons for the interest. I think some of the private sector didn't want to have to fly via New York to get to Miami. Be that what it may, they did. Everyone has benefited greatly. We've seen a tremendous increase in airlift as a result of it, and the objective was to increase direct routes to Cape Town. And this just gives us what we've done since 2015. 27 new routes, many new airlines, and one arrives in October 2024. You would have seen Norse's our newest deal that starts towards the end of this year. So there really is, and that just speaks to the demand as well, though. So it's been it's pride and joy, I think, of all the collaborators and stakeholders in it. It can be done. It is a very good example of collaboration between private and public sector, which is very reflective of the Western Cape at the moment as well, though. This just kind of speaks to what we've seen in inbound seat capacity since 2015, so it's only 9 years old. This is just in terms of performance. It's always a domestic. We're seeing the domestic terminal. We've seen good growth as well. In terms of year to date, up on last year, the same corresponding area, 13% corresponding period, 13%. And the one that's of great interest is the international terminal as well. Huge growth coming through. We're also seeing an increase in air cargo is also very much on our radar, and it's going to be very interesting to see, with the launch of the new online platform last week as well, that in terms of how things shift in terms of e-commerce as well, and what we're going to start seeing to come through there as well. So that's very much on our radar as well, to try and get a hold on that too. But the new retailer keeps things very close to their chest. So we are seeing phenomenal growth coming through, and we're seeing it in investment, we're seeing it in tourism. I mean, everyone's very much aware of what we saw towards the end of last year in terms of the tourism boom. It was quite interesting during COVID. Everyone was asking us for help. Last year we sent out a survey and we got like three responses. No one needed help. So it was in terms of the tourism sector. So which is a good sign in terms of what's actually how robust the industry is. This is recovery. We know it's interesting to see. We've moved away from recovery. We're no longer recovering. Post COVID, we are growing. But the red, it's just to kind of show the trend what we are seeing. And if we actually look at 108% for 2023 on 2019, and a number of the key markets have recovered and have exceeded pre-COVID levels. And year to date for 2024, we are almost 120% above 2019's levels as well, though. So it's all systems go. This is just in terms of air access, in terms of who's flying where at the moment. Not going to spend any time on that. That is the current out of Cape Town, the route map, always a great image, and it's good to see South America's being served, which hasn't been for many years. And as I alluded to, Africa and the Middle East, or the East, is an area which certainly is on our radar. Trickier than others, though. Cruise Cape Town, I mean, it's larger than life. When the two queens were here a couple of weeks ago, beautiful to see. We all felt transported to somewhere glamorous when we saw that picture of all the lights in the harbour. It really is a collaboration of the public and private sector. Westgrow is very involved in this. We have a number of key private sector stakeholders. It's quite a spectacle to see this when those ships are in, and I mean those of you who are at the waterfront certainly live it, you know, in terms of the number of tourists as well. So it really is, it's a very robust and growing industry for us. Over R1 billion contribution last year in the season. For every 31 visitors or 31 tourists and passengers, it creates one job. So it really is an industry which we see huge potential for. Very, very good last season. We had a really good season, and it looks equally promising for the season which lies ahead, October this year until May next year as well. We are seeing, I mean, as Alex will probably speak to, we are seeing an increased number of ships as a result of the Red Sea, who they're choosing not to go through the canal and coming past the Cape as well, though. So that has benefits for the province as well. Just a couple of the cruise liners we are seeing, and they're all shapes and forms, you know, from explorers to huge big liners to very smart super yachts at the moment as well. So there's quite a variety of the type of vessels we are seeing. And I'm sure I'm over my time, but thank you very much, and then we look forward to questions. Yeah.
Okay, morning everyone. It's lovely to be with you today. So I'm unfortunately from Joburg. Gavin was very right when he said you're a much more cheerful audience. And so I'm Aileen from RETEC. Disclaimer, before I start presenting a very stats-heavy presentation, I'm not a statistician or a data analyst. RETEC is a PropTech platform that is what we've tried to build, or what we are busy building, is a new age property management platform that is able to integrate and aggregate various data sources, both external data, like the information I'm going to show you today, as well as collecting all of your mall-owned data into one central platform so that you can start to compare what your research is saying versus your turnover. So the information that we are going to show you today is actually from a partnership of one of the solutions we've integrated into the RETEC platform called RL Consulting. So they are specialists in geospatial mobility data. So it's a combination of cell phone movement. So we track movement on people's cell phones. It's not linked to infrastructure in your malls or Wi-Fi networks. It's just general apps on phones. Enhanced with demographic and consumption expenditure data. So we put some stats together today to speak to the talk topic. So semigration to the Western Cape between 2020 and 2022, to give you an idea of where people are moving, the spending power that they're bringing with them, and I think to start to have a look at what's happening in the market, change in retail expenditure by province was largely driven by Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal and Western Cape. So national average 17.2%, Western Cape grew 21% during those 2 years. In terms of provincial contribution to retail expenditure, Gauteng is still dominating at 36%, followed by KZN, and then Western Cape contributing 15.5%. Eastern Cape and Limpopo were the ones that were subject to declines in total share, dropping just over 1%. So you can see in that change, in the 2 years, Western Cape grew in 0.5% contribution to total expenditure. But I think when we show you some of the numbers in terms of who's moving into the country, you'll see that increasing in the years ahead. So looking at the change by district, all of the district municipalities have experienced an increase in total retail expenditure except for Central Karoo. So you see that massive growth in the city of Cape Town, so growing 26.5%. But then really nice growth in all of the bordering districts, Cape Winelands, Eden, West Coast, Overberg, which have all also been popular with semigrators. If we break that down further, so which are the local municipalities that we're seeing growth in? Again, City of Cape Town coming out very strong, but Overstrand and Saldanha Bay growing over 5% in total retail expenditure. Also popular places for people moving from Joburg and other places in the country. Also saw positive changes in Stellenbosch, Breede Valley, Plet area, Knysna and Mossel Bay, although slightly smaller than the expenditure growth we saw in Overstrand and Saldanha. Then to look at actual number of people. So between 2020 and 2022, there was an absolute change in residents in City of Cape Town of just over 210,000 people. If we updated this, whether it stayed on the same trajectory or increased, we can confirm, but 210,000 people moving into City of Cape Town, largely in your middle and upper LSM income groups. So numbers are quite small, but in middle income, we saw 133,000, in upper LSM, 70,000. The absolute change in the other provinces is, in the other municipalities is smaller, but if you look at a place like George, attracting 2,300 new upper LSM residents, and that is one of the popular places for semigrators to move. And we're seeing similar stats in Stellenbosch, Drakensberg, Saldanha Bay. The change that we saw in Mossel Bay and Theewaterskloof was actually more geared to lower and middle LSM growth. So they had a loss in the upper LSM residents. Okay, then the next thing that we looked at for the talk was a bit of a holiday shuffle. So looking at stats for Christmas and for Easter for our local residents. So looking at Western Cape, what we found is that residents were 9% less likely to stay at home. So people living than 2022. So more travel from Western Cape residents out of the province. We did see a 28% decrease in visitation from residents of other provinces. But if you look at the Gauteng stats, their residents were 27% more likely to stay at home. And I think that's just indicative of the consumer pressures that everyone was facing ahead of December. So what we saw in Gauteng was people that predominantly would have previously traveled to their families for Christmas, stayed at home, and their families visited them. So visitation to Western Cape dropped 39% to Cape Town in December. We did see increases for Eastern and Northern Cape. So when it's slightly more accessible or presumed closer, a little bit easier. Then nationally in December, retail struggled a little bit. So visitation to the malls was down, dwell time was down, frequency down across all of the retail categories. So all of your main apparel, grocery was slightly below 2022. Then Easter starts to tell a slightly better story. So as much as travel was down, and this is just consolidated national travel, we did see that there was that uptick. It's sitting below the 2023 travel trend, but only 9% for your affluent market and 20% for your mass market. So if that can continue to pick up, hopefully a good story. What's really great for the malls, however, as much as we saw less travel across the country, visitation to shopping centres increased significantly above the 2023 average and continued to stay on that upward and above average trend. So people were looking for entertainment, they were going to the malls, they just might not have been able to go on holiday over Easter. I think that the Easter report was actually sent out by SACSC on Thursday last week. So there's quite a lot more detail if you want to check your mails from SACSC on Easter traffic. Okay, then we looked at some Cape Town specific sites so that we can give you some stats on how they perform against each other. And that's the nice part about the mobile phone data is we don't have to install anything in locations, but we can tell you how they perform. So first we looked at what we call cross-visitation to Cape Town Airport. So this shows you any device that was seen at Cape Town International Airport, where else were the devices seen. So 31% were also seen at OR Tambo, so makes sense in terms of Gauteng people coming into Cape Town and vice versa. What we do see in that top 10 performers is VNA. So 18% of people that were seen at Cape Town Airport come through to VNA, and 11% come through to Canal Walk. Then we see King Shaka. When we compare the cross-visitation of Cape Town Airport with OR Tambo, which I'll show you next, it is a lot more Cape Town-centric. So there's a lot more Cape Town shopping centres coming up in the mix. In terms of Joburg, you don't have that Joburg centricity. So Joburg, largest share is with Cape Town International, then King Shaka, and then we've got a super regional from each of the provinces. So Sandton comes in at 7.4%, VNA comes in at 6.6%. So was quite interesting for me that VNA is so high up on Joburg's cross-shop, because it just shows the tourist appeal of the VNA. And then Canal Walk also still showing some cross-shop with Joburg. Then, because Alex was speaking and because of the high cross-shop between Cape Town Airport and VNA, we went and looked at some stats specific to VNA. So just to show you what we mean when we say VNA, it's not the entire precinct, it's just looking at the shopping centre. So pulling in your cross-shop, so 21% of people that have been to VNA also go to Canal Walk, 15% go to the airport. So actually, when you think of it in the reverse, it is still being fed by a very healthy local market. But impact of tourism is obviously also very important, with OR Tambo coming in within your top 10 cross-visitation sites. And then you see some other nice Cape Town sites, so high cross-shop with Cavendish, with Constantia Village, with Tiger Valley, N1 City, which speaks to a level of affluence in terms of the demographics that would be shopping at those locations. Then we looked how far people are prepared to travel to your Cape Town sites. So VNA again, it speaks to a tourist appeal. So if you compared it to someone like Constantia Village, Constantia Village is serving a very local shopper base. They are able to pull 50% or their core catchment from a 3-kilometre radius of the centre, where VNA has to extend further to attract that 50%. And that's really just weighted by those travellers from Gauteng and your international travellers. And then Canal Walk actually also exceeding what we would consider a national benchmark for a super regional. Their core catchment is normally 7.5 kilometres. So also speaking to the tourist appeal of the centre. What we looked at next was where are we seeing all of the feet? So what does the share of footfall look like for VNA and its competitors? So it measures all of the traffic to the competitors and what share are you attracting. What you can see if you look at the bottom, the Cape Town Airport, you can see that visitation increasing throughout the year. So much more traffic coming to and from the airport itself. And you can see that most of the centres maintain a fairly stable footfall share. I think a slight decrease on Canal Walk, but it's just because of the increased visitation to the airport. Then we looked at Canal Walk as well. So when you consider what V&A was showing, which was largely the airports, Canal Walk serving a much more local market, so highest cross shop with N1 City, V&A, then Tiger Valley, Table Bay, Cavendish, and the airport only coming in 6th. So 7.5% of people that go to Canal Walk were also seen at the airport during the measured period. And we did that share of footfall representation for the Canal Walk competitors as well. And if you think back to that Easter report on visitation increasing over the Easter weekend, what we saw was the more local serving competitors like N1 City actually having a significant increase in footfall share over that period. Just to be clear, that's not an absolute increase. So Canal Walk, V&A all experienced an increase in footfall. So it's just showing the change in the actual footfall share. Okay, then to give you some idea of national, well, averages in terms of type of retail centres on some of our key metrics. So dwell time, what we saw was that in Gauteng, dwell times were either similar to Western Cape or slightly longer, and except for your super regional centres. So people spend longer at super regionals in Western Cape than they do in Gauteng. Could possibly be due to the lower density of super regionals in Western Cape versus Gauteng. And then interesting stat when you compare to the slide I'll show next, which is the core catchment for all of these mall types, is that hypercentres and big box retailers have quite a bit higher dwell times in Gauteng than Western Cape. So those two segments were drawing from smaller catchments in the Western Cape than Gauteng. And what we find is that, so if you just look at the hypercentres, people coming from 7 Ks in Cape Town, 9.5 Ks in Gauteng. For the, that was big box retailers. For the hypercentres, it's quite a big difference. So it's people are prepared to travel 2.5 kilometres in Western Cape, 5 kilometres in Gauteng. What we find is that people don't like to, and it sounds very strange, cross natural boundaries. So in Gauteng, it's a lot more flat. People are traveling a little bit further. We don't have a beautiful mountain distracting us. So I think that that's probably the reason why, but no major differences in terms of how long people are prepared to stay and be engaged at your centres. In terms of frequency by mall type, again, Gauteng has slightly higher frequencies, specifically in your convenience centres. So your value, your small regional community and convenience, not major, but just indicative that people in Gauteng are more mobile daily and more likely to stop off at a convenience centre for a few groceries on the way home than they are in the Western Cape. And I think that that is something that we've been seeing since COVID, is there's these two core trends that are driving retail performance. So we see either this big push to convenience, so I need to be able to get in, get out, everything I need in 15 minutes, or I'm going to go and consolidate everything in one visit. So I'm going to go to a super regional and I'm going to do my groceries, my entertainment, stay for lunch or dinner. So it's either convenience or consolidation. And those seem to be winning in terms of campaigns that the malls that we work with are launching to the market. We've also seen, specifically in the grocery segment, a big change in terms of how far people are prepared to travel for their favorite grocer. So what we're seeing is that 75% of people will choose their favorite grocer to be within 2 kilometers of their house. So if you are further than that, I think that if you increase to a 5 or 6 kilometer distance from the person's house, you've got a 10% chance of being their preferred grocery destination. So I think when we look at our core catchments, especially for the regionals or the super regionals who are trying to push grocers who used to be driving most of the foot traffic, we just need to consider who are actually the grocery shoppers, and are they part of our, if it's V&A, 21 kilometer radius for 75% of the people. So just an interesting stat. What we've given next is a view of visitation across the country, specifically for your affluent market. So affluent for us is considered LSM 8 to 10, and then we've lit up where there are very, very high footfall polygons that have significant dwell time. So where are people choosing to spend time over the weekend? So you see V&A area light up, you see the promenade around Sea Point, Long Street, Gardens, Harringtons, where there's lots of dining and entertainment options popular with the young crowd. Then you see that Claremont area, so I think that's Cavendish, Maynard Mall. So very nice for me that at that very high visitation, footfall, and very high dwell time, a lot of our shopping centres are actually lighting up on the weekend. So people do still want to spend their weekends in shopping centres, even though Western Cape offers a lot of options. You see there Canal Walk, N1 City, and then quite a lot of concentration of these cells around the Bloberg area. So that's Bayside lighting up nicely. And then you'll see now the beachfront where there's all of those restaurants. So affluent market, definitely looking for dining and entertainment on the weekend and happy to do it in shopping centres. So you see that big Bay area. There's a nice concentration of affluent traffic, and that's also one of the areas that has been popular with Joburg people emigrating to the Cape. And then there's small pockets which you would expect. So you see, I think that's Kalk Bay, Muizenberg, again, areas where there's nice restaurants. You see Stellenbosch light up very nicely. And these are all of the areas that also light up, like if we didn't filter it for weekend, if we filtered it for festive or Easter, so holiday periods. So you see Stellenbosch has got a nice concentration, and then it does thin out a bit, which is expected in the smaller areas. So I think if you move along the coast, there's a little light on in Gordons Bay, and then 2 little lights on in Hermanus. So again, we do need to consider that not every foot is the same spending power. So sometimes high footfall doesn't necessarily mean lots of money, but if you were choosing to open a store or open a restaurant or where to spend your effort, I think this should give you a good indication of where there's nice pockets of affluence in the Western Cape. Okay, and that is my update, so thank you everyone.
Wow, how do you follow that? Janine, Aileen, I don't know quite how I'm going to even try and summarize this aid. I'm going to go a little bit less technical. There will be a few technical ones. I'll try and go a little bit different as well and try and give you a little bit more of an understanding of the broader ecosystem and try and pull the two together, but very insightful stuff that's coming through at the moment. So Amanda asked me to speak and never speak last at one of these things, so note to self, not again. It's give the guys a sense of the value of tourism and what does tourism mean? So I think to most of us in the room, tourism means these pictures that we see here. It's the guys on the bus, it's the damn Joe Burgers, Aileen, who come down and use up our beaches in December. We get frustrated with them. They walk too slowly, you have to go around them. But sometimes we might be missing the point. There's a lot more to the tourism ecosystem than just the bed nights, than just the flight numbers that come through there. I think when we're looking at it that way, we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg. And I think this is the part that people forget. When you talk tourism, talking also local tourism, try and understand there's a lot more to it that actually is below the surface. Because when you realize that you've got a tourist, there's an entire ecosystem that feeds off those tourists, whether they're internationals, whether they're locals. Maybe I can give you an example. Let's take somebody who's come down here for 2 days. Just run it through. Let's walk through. How did they get here? Oh, they went through passport control, international person. Somebody had to help them with passport control. There was also baggage. Then all of a sudden, Porter had to take all their bags. Those Americans, we love the Americans, have big bags like this, so take them to the car. Oh, hang on, we now need a bus driver, maybe a taxi driver, an Uber driver. We need them to take them along. Then we eventually get to the hotel. What happens there? They need to be serviced. They go into the reception, they check in with the reception. Oh, hang on, now they need their bed turned down, room service, where do we go from there? Then all of a sudden, hang on, we actually need to do something. We're in the most beautiful city in the world, second best ranked in the world. Let's go and ask the concierge, what should we do today? Well, maybe we should go for a tour. Now we've got a tour guide who has to take us around. Along the way, we might stop for some souvenirs. You get a shop assistant. You need some people to help you on those ones. Then all of a sudden, oh, hang on, there's the Table Mountain. There's the aquarium. There's Cape Point. Let's go to one of the attractions. Let's go there. And then you get back, and now, oh, hang on, I'm a bit peckish. Let's go out for dinner. What happens? There's the maitre d'. You're serviced by the waiter. You're serviced by the barman. I think you guys get the picture. There is an entire ecosystem that is sitting behind this, and these are all locals. So when we think of an international tourist, don't think of this as, oh, it's the international tourist and that's the focus. It's that entire ecosystem that are all locals that is servicing those ones. And we talked about that, the service economy. The entire Cape Town is a service economy. So when you have this guy, remember that? Not so long ago, it's not just the hotels and the attractions that suffer. Yes, they suffer badly. The waterfront suffered very, very badly. But it's that entire ecosystem because those people build a living. 1 in 9 jobs are created from each one of those tourist ones. So if you lose the tourists, you lose jobs. So that's what's happened to Cape Town. As the tourists have returned, we've seen this incredible bounce back because of the broader ecosystem that feeds off it. So let's start to have a look at what happens to these ones and try and pull together some of the data that we've had from the different sections. So we've talked about footfall, we've talked about the amazing stuff that the Westgrow team are doing. So what have we done? We tried to kind of analyze it and understand it. So using a similar system that Eileen was talking about, we've actually worked with PwC and we work on credit card data because what we want to understand is truly about spend. I think we've all seen the changes to the footfall patterns and how those work, but it's all about spend. That's what the retailers want to know. That's what the mall owners want to know. So it's something that's been piloted in the new West End company in London, and what they do is they take anonymized credit card data. It's POPI compliant, it's GDR compliant. The first 4 numbers of your debit card, credit card, identify which country you're coming from. So we take that together with our footfall data, together with all of these ones, and you put it together and you really start to get a sense of the spend around your area. We've piloted this with over 85 different sites, from restaurants to hotels to retailers. We don't have enough grocers there, Maurice, but that maybe gives it a bit more of a skew towards the international one, but it really gives you a sense of where it was. We've had over 4.5 million transactions, so I think it's a statistically relevant sample that we managed to get through. So where are the people coming from? And exactly as you saw with Janine was mentioning, most of our tourists are coming, or the biggest spend we're getting from our tourists is the Americans. And you can start to see them there, 19% of it. Our other traditional markets, being the UK and the EU, those together add up to 20%. So those are pretty much what you would have expected. I think the big opportunities for us are the ones that are kind of circled in yellow. And what you can see there is the Gulf Estates, and we saw a massive increase in the Gulf Estates last year. When we were talking to the PwC guys, they were saying it was quite scary to see how much Cape Town actually picked up in terms of Gulf Estates in July and August last year, that they were thinking that half of the people went away from London and moved to Cape Town. So it really just gives you a sense of what it is. Janine also talked about South America. It's a new flight direction for us, and a very important flight direction for those retailers in the market. The South American guys really, really like high-end goods. They have big duties on their ones. So when those guys come in, we'll start to see that growing. So it's a big opportunity. I think the obvious other ones is the South African, the local SADC countries. And again, as much as Joburg is trying to be that hub for Africa, certainly Cape Town is starting to service the closer SADC countries. And that becomes a very important one for us. And these guys have also a low representation of brands in the country. The obvious elephant in the room is how few people we're getting from the east. And I think, we don't want to be overrun by tourists. And you've seen all those horrible pictures of, the Trevi Fountain or the Great Wall of China. But Cape Town still has a huge amount of space. Exactly to Janine's point, we could double, we could treble international tourism, and you wouldn't feel the difference. And think about that ecosystem, about what that does to the local economy as you move forward. So going back to that point about, let's look at the number of people who are arriving and compare those number of people to arriving as to how much spend they've got. So if you take the line axis, it's a 1-to-1 kind of ratio. So the Australians, we don't like them, but they kind of, for every Australian, they spend about 1 or 1. So yeah, we'll tolerate them for the moment. The guys we love, those Americans. Oh man, we love the Americans. We hear them in the waterfront. My team will know this one. We see them at the watershed, and I don't know, they're always very loud. Hey Jim, have you seen this? It's only $3. Let's get 7. We love these guys. They know how to spend. So retailers are fantastic. It's the best kind of people to come there. Some interesting ones down there. If you look at the guys who are kind of under-indexing, if you say, well, hang on, we're not getting as much out of the Dutch, we're not getting as much out of the Germans, and not getting as much out of the Brits. Why? I think it's, sometimes you've got to delve into the details and understand that, because a lot of these guys are the ones who are coming here visiting family, or they actually are swallows. They have a space here, and that's why they're not necessarily spending. So sometimes you have to read through the data, stats are stats, and you've got to read through that. But I think the key one is understanding the benefit of some of these guys. How do we get more out of them, and who are our really good customers? So the more Americans we can get in, great. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the others. Let's delve into a few of our ones. So now let's look at the local market. And the local market, when we looked at these, and I said it's slightly skewed, accounts for about 40% of the spend of that survey that we did. Average transaction value is lower than the average because it's the local market, and interestingly has dropped versus last year. So that talks about how our local economy is under pressure, and we're not trying to hide away from that, and that is there. So how do we supplement it? But where do they spend? So, I think it's when the tourists are coming, or when the local guys are coming down here, it's generally business purposes, but we've all seen Teams and Zoom, and that's changed that. So we're getting less business travel coming down to the locals. But then when they're here, they spend at the restaurants, they spend on clothing and apparel. And obviously Easter time is quite a good time for many of those guys to come over here. So that's what we're seeing there. Compare that with the internationals. So the internationals, as we all know, generally come here in summer. It says they all come here in December, but I think if we were walking around, we would think it's more February, March, April. Because again, remember those December ones? Those are the people visiting the friends and family. So you're probably not seeing them in the traditional spaces. So that's the other reason you would get that. And as you can imagine, spend is higher on an every ATV one, but they are booking a little bit longer in advance, so you can start to predict when are they coming. They always come over the same periods, and obviously they like to spend in the restaurants as well. Not so much on health and well-being, and when you're wearing your flip-flops the whole time, they don't really care about footwear. So if there's any footwear guys around, it's not looking so good for you at the moment with those internationals. maybe take another deep dive and just understand those Gulf customers and have a look at how different the graph is on the bottom right-hand side as to when they come and why the Gulf customer is so good for us. Cape Town is seasonal. You know, it's winter, we're May, everybody kind of goes, what the hell happened? It's been such a great season, and now what's going on? It's winter. It's always the same every year. But this is what really we were talking about earlier, is how much the Gulf guys come in July and August. It's a great time to help balance that seasonality and just how much more they spent last year than the previous year. It just shows how we're getting more of that and how Cape Town in particular is seen as a very friendly country for these ones. So I think we, as South Africans, we often give ourselves a bad rap. We are very, very open to multiculturalism, and that really, really does help Cape Town in that side of things. Another area that we didn't talk about, or I think the others, is the impact of events. Cape Town is being fantastic at running international events, and that has a material impact on us. And I think even the Western Cape is also doing it. So we did quite a bit of a deep dive into one or two of these ones. So we took the URC rugby final last year. So any of you rugby fans out there would have known it was Stormers against Munster about a year ago. And as you would expect, if you looked at the actual day, which was the 27th of May, the graph over there, if you're a pure retailer, it's actually not a great day. We were slightly under-indexing because, you know, everybody was going to the rugby and nothing was happening. Obviously, it was really good if you're a bar or a restaurant because the guys came and had something to eat before or afterwards. But what people are missing is the point of the shoulders. And what you can see here is the spend for the week was actually greater. So be careful about comparing one day against one day when you should actually be looking at it in a week, because otherwise you're going to say that event is not good for us. It's actually a much broader one. Oh, and surprisingly, where's Munster from? Ireland. Who would have thought? We had 396% increase in Irish spend. Stats. Formula E. Probably even a bigger example of how that can impact. We closed the roads around here. You couldn't move. In fact, you would not have been able to get in here. So an absolute washout day if you were a retailer. It really wasn't a great day because it was on a Saturday, and Sunday we started to get the roads going again. But once again, have a look at the impact on the days before. People came in earlier to look around, and the days after, even more so. And where did the people come from? All those Max Verstappen fans. There's a whole lot of Dutch, the Germans. We know they like to drive fast on their autobahns. Not a major surprise. It's where they spend as well. You see them spending on jewelry. You see them spending in other areas as well. Another area is, again, all the events and the things that are happening at the various convention centres, the one at Century City and the CTICC. These bring in huge amounts of additional benefit. So once again, think about that economy and how it moves forward. So here, mining in Durban, now you start to see a different set of international tourists coming here. Congo, Canada, why? That's where they've got, they're drilling for oil sands. Those are the mining guys, and they spend at different areas. They love jewelry. Oh, hang on, I'm over here. I better take some jewelry back to where I'm going. So again, you're starting to see how different customers spend in different areas. And once you start to understand this, you really can start to predict it going forward. Tourism trends, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this one. I think, a few of us have talked about it. We've seen the uplift in airlines. We've seen the uplift in cruise. I think these market shifts, we've talked about less business travel. We've talked about the halal tourism. You're going to see some more of the Russians out because South Africa is very accommodating in terms of the BRICS side of things. So they can't spend anywhere else. So you probably see a lot more of the cash economy because you can't even spend on their credit cards. But we've seen experiences. So those of you in terms of attractions, these are very important. That's the new area that they want to. Geopolitics and how does that impact? Exactly as Janine was saying, we're seeing so many more cruise ships this year, not necessarily because Cape Town's a really great cruise destination, because you've actually got to motor quite a long way to get down here, because they're having to avoid the sewers. So unintended consequences, we're getting that benefit. So that might be a short-term blip. Climate change and exactly what you're talking about, the green economy, that's another example. All the stuff that Westgrow is doing with Amazon, with the green economy, with all these people who are investing in here, it's another ecosystem. Those services, the people have to eat, they have to shop, they have to go somewhere for dinner. Think about that. That is where this industry is really going to benefit from it. And again, unfortunately, there still is the elephant in the room, which is that weak domestic economy. So I think that's why we are so reliant on the tourism side of things, and it's not just the tourist, as we talked about. So, future. What do I predict in terms of the future? I think it's been quite an interesting journey. We've seen the bounce back. It's a real hockey stick since COVID. Western Cape is in a good space. Cape Town's in a good space. So I think there's been a definitive flight to safety and a flight to security. We've seen that, and people are choosing Cape Town because of the way it's working. It's appeared to do that. We know there are challenges. We're not trying to make a political statement, but it does appear to be part of the country that seems to be working there. What does that mean? That results in increased demand. So we're now seeing more and more people moving down here. You saw that. And that gives people confidence. So now all of a sudden businesses have got confidence. The guys are now willing to open more and more stores. People are coming in here, and those foreign direct investment means we can do that. So what does that result in? That's going to result in further investment, further development, more customers for everybody in here. So that's why the future is very, very bright. You just have to think a little bit cleverly. Sometimes it can be an oil tank farm. Sometimes it could be a marina.
Thanks very much to all of our speakers this morning. Can we just have another round of applause for them as a collective bunch? I'm going to start off by congratulating Alex for making COVID look cute. But you know, it's a nice combination of presentations that speak to different areas. It's exciting to see the broader economy and how we connected, Janine, how we're not part of an isolated world. We form part of the greater whole of South Africa. It's nice to see that we're a chunk of that GDP. It's more exciting to see that the Western Cape has a growth spurt above that GDP. And I think in the context of how it's not just Cape Town, it's a broader Western Cape appeal was exciting and nice to see in the presentation. Aline, it's nice to see and exciting that our retail centres are touched beyond the V&A and the Canal Walk, that those movements go all the way as far down as to Constantia Village. So I'll have to admit to Deirdre that there are foreign people in the centre. It's great. It's be able to quantify that flow and to get a justification of our internal fear, or not fear, internal excitement of this palpable growth in a city. It's great to be able to quantify it. Actually, you've gave us a great insight into what events do, not only for the V&A, but what they do for the economy and what they do for us as a city, and how that relates to the broader spend and that trickle effect of what tourism can do throughout the shopping and into domestic economy and into the lives of people. The only concern I had is you went straight from maitre d' to waiter to bar. But I am willing to join you for dinner. I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. I'd like you guys to give us some questions. I've got one in the back there. Is there a roving mic that we can get out?
Okay, first of all, compliments to all the speakers. It was really inspiring, and it gave a really great overview of the Western Cape, where they are now, where they're going, and what Westgrow and everybody is doing to build and to create the sustainability. I have one key question, and in fact, not to put a dampener on today at all, but it is when we talk about sustainability and exporting and all of those things that came up. The Western Cape economy, from my understanding, is not an export or not an exporter or a major manufacturer for export. The exports is foreign exchange coming in from tourism, the call centres, etc. So that is the general reach, and that is where Cape Town is. My concern is also there is a reliance here, or the Western Cape is quite remote. So we get the blips, and there are a lot of riding the waves, obviously, of the shipping coming around, which is great, but not necessarily sustainable. And when it comes to infrastructure, like when you go around the world now, we're having the internet problems, the cables around the sea, and the remote distance to Cape Town, and traveling, and all of those things are a risk factor to the Western Cape. So I'm just wondering how the plans will be to mitigate all those risks by being remote, infrastructure, technology, and all of those good things. And as I said, not a dampener, it's just a question. And when you look at the Amazons and you look at the large online companies that are coming here, from a logistical point of view, that's it's not a challenge for them to take the calls and expedite the orders, but it's actually movements of goods and services. And South African railways and harbours, unfortunately, now, like Cape Town, from a goods point of view, could be losing out because they've dropped right to the bottom of the list. So it's not negative. I'm just saying those are probably things to need to consider. Some of the exports are going to go out of Maputo now. People are literally repatriating because of that. So it's what can we do to build up our infrastructure here that it is sustainable and able to service and keep the connectivity. Sorry for rambling on, but that's just the question.
I think it's a good question. I think, Janine, we're going to let you tackle that.
Kick it off. Happy? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Infrastructure is something which it's a very valid point, but I think for those of you who probably don't follow this, but the city of Cape Town is remarkable in terms of its spend on infrastructure at the moment. There are various facets to infrastructure. There's the tech side, there's the urban mobility, which is roads, which I think all of you might have experienced this morning or not, depending how early you came into the city. The city of Cape Town is spending billions on infrastructure currently, and it's broad-based infrastructure. It's from water and sewers, it's to energy. For those of you who are on the City of Cape Town grid, it's not such a pain point at the moment that load shedding's been kind of disappeared for, I'm not too sure why. But it's there's huge investment across infrastructure in terms of basic services. There's also tremendous infrastructure investment in terms of infrastructure, in terms of roads, in terms of corridors. We're seeing a huge amount of infrastructure going into my city bus routes. Enormous, and that is purely to address the congestion that we're seeing as well. In terms of the greater factors at play, the likes of the ports, the likes of the national roads, etc., that is not a Western Cape government lane. That is national. So that is something which is beyond, strictly speaking, is ruled by national. That said, we're very abreast of developments in the port. There's a huge amount of communication and discussions currently going on at the moment, more so than there ever have been. And so that is very positive as well, though. In terms of us being so far away from the rest of the world, you must remember that exports are not necessarily just goods. Exports are services. Services are exports as well, though. And yes, in terms of call centres, but that doesn't necessarily mean the goods are actually being exported from Cape Town. You know, a call centre, the very nature of a call centre is that it might be an Indian company who it is more profitable for the company to have the call centre in Cape Town. They like the time zone, they like the language. Apparently it's very easy to understand, which is some of the key factors that have come out. So I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect place in the world at the moment. Every continent, every country has its struggles, and these differ as to where you are. But no, I don't think it's a huge. We're aware of our struggles. We are dealing with them. I think it's not about. You know, at Westcro we always say we act on behalf. We all part of South Africa, and we rightfully are so. But it's not that. Yeah, I think we're in a relatively good space, you know, in terms of how to move forward. In terms of sustainability, yes, it is a huge focus. If we want to export, we need to have your carbon footprint needs to be taken into consideration. We do export a lot of goods sorry, I can't see you hidden behind the pillar, but we do, you know, our largest export from the Western Cape is citrus. You know, so I mean, we had over 26 billion rands worth of citrus exported last year. Manufacturing is not a huge export commodity for us. It is largely consumed domestically. And you know, we're seeing wonderful growth in some of the key retailers in terms of the ones that spring to mind are kind of void company names. Someone you all tend to wear those puffer jackets, those people, you know, and that's a success story, you know, in terms of that as well. So, but they're not, I'm not saying they don't export, but our largest exports from the province, 7 out of 10 are agri or agri-processed. Very aware of, and of the largest, and those are the largest export earners. So we do have, and that's going to a variety of markets. We've got, a lot of it goes to the US, a lot of it goes to the Middle East, different requirements in terms of phytosanitary needs and that too. So we have a diverse base. So in terms of exports, we've seen I didn't share exports today because I didn't really think it would be of interest. And our exports continue to grow.
Thank you for the question.
Pleasure.
They're obviously inhibitors, and I'm just going to change tack a little bit differently here. It is very clear that tourism, local and international, boosts the economy. It gives us great rewards for very little pain besides traffic and beach space. But when it comes to semigration, and you look at what's happened in countries across the world, and you look at ourselves as a country that's urbanized now, I think close to 70%, there are actually a lot of negatives. You get a lot of households coming down, you get shortages of school, you get congested traffic, you get rental prices going through the roof, you get displaced people that can't afford the areas they used to live in because affluence comes in and is willing to pay a price on demand. What is the balance? And is it a short-term issue for a long-term gain? And Aileen, could you give us a view? And I think each of the speakers.
I don't know about a short-term issue for long-term gain, but if we look at what we're seeing, and specifically like the Gauteng residents moving down to Western Cape, there's a lot of new development in the Western Cape. So if you look at areas like Blouberg, there's all of those greenfield developments, all of the estates. We're seeing a lot of the domestic migration actually moving into those new developments. So if you're looking at where to focus efforts in terms of retail outlets or malls, maybe it is in those zones which have previously been more outliers.
So for you, it's a stimulator of growth. It's an enabler of being able to provide, provided the Western Cape can meet those opportunities. Janine, your view?
It's in many ways it's a double-edged sword because there's a huge amount of pressure on already strained infrastructure to a point. I alluded to water. Water in our world is something which we're very aware of.
Yeah.
Day zero came and went, but it hasn't gone away. And it's not unique to the Western Cape. It's a global phenomenon. Water is going to be a more and more scarce resource. That said, the City of Cape Town is doing remarkable work in terms of what's actually going on behind the scenes in terms of preparing for that and actually diversifying their sources of water as well. So on the one hand, you've got that pressure, and as Gavin alluded to, roads, schooling, beach, that's an issue, stuff like that. So, but in the same breath, it facilitates developments, it facilitates housing, it facilitates employment. So it's a push and pull. It's a give and gain. So and I think a lot of what we're seeing now in your space is demand driven as a result of that too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but it does create employment.
Good. Alex, from your side and from...
You made me go last again.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to reverse this.
Look, I think they've mentioned most of the ones. It's fundamentally a supply and demand one. It's a temporary, I see it as a temporary one. It's an opportunity. When there's additional demand, what's happened, you've seen a huge explosion of development in terms of, you just think about the people moving in around here, the CBD, the amount of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments that are coming on stream. Yes, it always lags the demand. There's then, I think, also look at the opportunities. It really brings in an opportunity for public-private partnerships in terms of those schools, in terms of the water security. I think we actually do have one of the other benefits is we can become water secure. We live at the sea. We can have desalination plants. You can't have that in Gauteng. It's looking for the opportunities rather than the frustrations. It's a sign of a growing economy and a healthy economy.
And fortunate to have growth. Are there any more questions from the floor? There we go. Here in the front.
I just want to ask, maybe Janine, it's more geared towards you. I'm sure there's other cities around the world that have experienced a similar growth trajectory that Cape Town is going through. So I don't know if there's any case studies or any cities that you've been using as basically a case study, like I said.
Thank you. A very good question. Just for the room, it's a question on whether there are not similar case studies in the world in terms of where this growth and migration has happened. and whether West Grow's had an opportunity to look at those by comparison.
Officially, no, we don't. That's probably more the City of Cape Town, because they really are behind the nuts and bolts in terms of, they're very futuristic in terms of their vision. We had to do something for them for 2050 in terms of where we see it all, being in 2050. So that is really in terms of their length of where they're planning for the city.
Right.
In terms of, so the real answer is no. We as West Grow don't, but we certainly do align to. We're very much aware of similar cities. We think of the Sydneys, we think of the Melbourne. There are many parallels. We think of Boston to a certain extent with their tech sector and that as well. But in many ways, Cape Town is unique because of where we are and in terms of our assets and our challenges that we have as well, though. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think there are many pockets of excellence to choose from various cities who have had similar bursts of growth as well, though.
Answer your question? That was a good answer. Anybody else?
Marwan's a complete curveball. We're talking about tourism and boats and all the explosion in Table View, Glover Strand, Melkbos. Do you ever foresee, since you've done to 2050, that we will actually have ferry services bringing commuters into the CBD? Because our roads cannot cope. I mean, this morning, for example, I literally had to turn around. There was something going on. So I actually had to turn around. And, I just see all the growth, the building, obviously all the retail centres out there. But at the end of the day, you want them coming to the waterfront, you want them coming to the canal walks, you want them going into Constantia, to take the pressure off our roads. Is it in the 2050 planning that we'll have some kind of ferry boat?
Very bright light. I'm not too sure who you're looking at. It's one of the three.
I think it's a general question.
I can pick up some of this one. I think congestion into the city is a massive issue, and again, this is going to require a number of people to get on the page. There are some long-term opportunities. We have to finish the highways. The city is looking at that. We have to get a bit smarter about how we do it, and I think there are some old-fashioned geospatial planning challenges. Most cities are actually taking down the elevated freeways and spreading the load. I think we continue to still look at that old American adage. We have surprisingly looked at a ferry across to Bloberg. It would be a wonderful idea. But we've got this small thing that it's called the Cape of Storms as well. So the sailors in the room will tell you, it's wonderful. You go to Brisbane and the guys are zooting around. Here, it's great on a calm day. You do not want to be on a boat in a bad day out there. So I think maybe technology will change it. Who knows? There could be some wild ideas, and funicular. Or there's opportunities. I think people need to dream big and see what we can get there.
Eggs, I guess, goes to a broader question as well. You're involved in the V&A in a much bigger precinct. You have a lot of development phases. How accessible, how efficient, how encouraging and enabling is the city of Cape Town to those developments and those development conflicts? Is it a positive framework? Can more be done? Is it encouraging?
Look, I think the answer is you could always do more, but I think we've got a good relationship, and I think it is that, again, I keep stressing the public-private partnership, is they realise we're one of the biggest ratepayers in the city, so it's in their interest to help us to grow, but responsibly. We can't just grow, we have to earn the rights, we have to show that we're doing it properly, measured, doing it responsibly from a green perspective. How are we giving back? Where's the inclusivity? So I think these are all things that everybody has to look at when we're growing. It's not just, you can cherry pick and away you go, but it's a very considered approach.
Janine, from your side?
For those of you who are or not aware, the City of Cape Town recently announced the appointment, and I wrote her name down, of a manager to initiate a property development forum. That's going to be launched in June 2024, and that is to address challenges and blockages in terms of investment in the sector as well, though. So very proactive, and I mean that's obviously you sit on the other side of it's a different lens that you view it, but they certainly are very aware of the importance of being able to engage with the sector as well, though.
Any other questions from the room? Yeah, Wouter, up front, and then we'll move to the back.
Yeah, just as far as tourism is concerned, I think one of our biggest issues is security. Something happens on Table Mountain, and I think we all know, you speak to family and friends and tourists and stuff, and that's I think the biggest issue for us. Who takes responsibility to get a message out there? And it's a fine balance not to put a false message out there, but who takes responsibility out there to say it's not that bad in certain areas? Because, you know, I'm quite actually involved, fortunately, with a couple of SITs, and it's amazing the work that they do and, you know, what goes into it, and education for tourists that comes. But, you know, sometimes you look at a little educational video, and if I sit in Norway and I see them, they actually give me the opposite. You know, it tells me, you know, don't go there, you know, you might get pickpocketed. So my question really, and Janine, we keep on throwing you under the bus, you know, but are there any initiatives as far as that's concerned?
We have, you know, safety is the City of Cape Town and Western Cape government. It's not us. It's Westgro. It's definitely not us, but we're very aware of it because it impacts tourism. We have a playbook at work called at the agency called the Book of Awkward Messaging, you know, and that's very much it, you know, in terms of creating that. That awareness of, but in any city, there's the road that you don't go beyond. It's not unique to us, you know, but it is about having that available to your tourists. And we speak about this at length at the office as well, though, in terms of whose role is it, where do we have this, do we position these at without creating anxiety in terms of to the tourists? Do we have almost like a portal, you know, this is what happens if this happens, you know, without. And just creating that awareness, 100%. But it's about finding that balance of proactively creating and educating as opposed to alarming, you know, because but it would be foolish to pretend that you can drive on all the roads where you shouldn't probably be. And I mean, we all saw the Google thing that happened earlier this year. But it's also, I think it's up to, there needs to be, and it's not, once again, it's not us. I mean, I think it's a broader discussion in the tourism industry or fraternity in terms of who, where does that sit? And maybe it is a very easy app that you can download when you come through the airport that can actually, these are the tips and, you know, as to the do's and the don'ts type thing as well, though. So, but it is a very valid point. But there is, the city once again is spending a tremendous amount of investment in terms of infrastructure for security. I mean, the mayor announced something this week in terms of those drones and that as well, and on the mountain, and the LEAP offices and that as well, though. So they're very aware of it and are managing it in a way which is not alarming, but there's lots of boots on the ground in the literal and figurative sense as well in terms of trying to get ahead of it.
Thank you. There was another question just behind Fota, and then I'll come to you, Tony.
Hi, good morning. My question is also to Janine. One of your slides, you had a forecasted GDP per capita growth of about 2.1% for 2024 versus an estimate of about 0.5% for 2023. That's a big change. So what would you say are the key drivers for that change?
Is that in the terms of the spend, the tourism spend?
GDP. It's a question on GDP. Yeah. I think in 2 of the years, if I'm correct, the Western Cape has outstripped national GDP almost by double, and looking into 24 is the same. And you're asking what are the leading causes or industries pushing that growth?
GDP per cap or GDP?
I think per capita.
Don't do a forecast GDP per capita. Anyway,
no, I think it was total GDP.
Total GDP. Yeah, it's not GDP per capita. It's the GDP graph. We've had various, you know, the economies are all very diverse in terms of, there are parallels with Gauteng, but Gauteng's a lot bigger, you know, in terms of, it's Gauteng, KZN, and then the Western Cape is the largest contributor to GDP of the country. Various things. Tourism is not ironically, tourism only accounts for about 2.8% of GVA in the Western Cape. It's about 3.5% nationally, and this was in 2022. That's the latest data that's been made available. Different drivers. Gauteng in turn is largely commodities based, also a very strong services sector. The majority of our growth comes from, it's very seasonal. Agriculture is a huge player in your traditional first and third quarters, annual quarters, but we have a consistent play from services. Services, manufacturing to an extent, but a lot of it does come from the services sector that we do see the growth coming through. GDP per cap we don't forecast, so that's GDP per cap is always looking back historically in terms of the number of people versus the GDP in that as well. Yeah.
Tony, you had a question?
Sorry,
oh, good.
Showing my age. Probably about 15 years ago, I had a discussion with somebody from Westgro. And just picking up on what Astrid said about ferries, at that stage, the suggestion was an elevated train, very much similar to the ones they've got in Vancouver, which work very well. But just to bring people in from the suburbs into the city, not a kind of, once you're in the city, the train, you know, there's buses and stuff going over. Is there still something somewhere around?
Again, that should be a City of Cape Town discussion as opposed to us. But to that point, in terms of public transport, the My City bus routes, that's how it's up and running. It doesn't service all of the areas. It is expanding, but that is one way. And because with the bus lane, for those of you who do come in on the N2, I always chuckle and think like, well, everyone must just get home in their own time. But you can come in at pace on the bus lane. There's no, I don't know if you know, but there's no bus lane going out. It's only on the way in. So that. I'm not aware of it. That's all driven by the city, and I mean that would be a long-term play in terms of financing of that as well. So that I don't know the answer. I apologize. Yeah.
I know that the kind of station was going to end up where.
Tony, you have to realise it's not happening. I think the big understanding is if you look at the strain on the infrastructure, and that unless these multi-avenues of exploration, bus, train. The functioning of the coming in on the airport, all of this public transport needs to start to work. But you're always going to have a challenge trying to motivate sky trains when normal trains aren't running. Yeah. And I think there's a clear indication, and it's echoed by everyone in terms of development. You hope that these things are coming together, and that the city works together with national government to produce a city that has all of those elements to facilitate movement. Or we will strangle ourselves. There's no doubt about it. I'm going to ask Aileen a question, and then I'm going to go to Alex, just so Janine can have a little breather here. Let's take it back to shopping centres and the impact of what we see in the Western Cape. It was interesting to see that we have a lot of coastal developments and semigration and upliftment throughout just about everything except the small Karoo, and if you haven't visited that, you should. It's a phenomenal place. But what is happening on the ground in terms of retail expansion and retail sales? Are we seeing that buoyancy? We seem to be channeling over a similar Easter pattern. I know in our assets in Growth Point, we actually had a very good Western Cape Christmas. We had ahead of growth of the rest of the country in terms of spend here. Are we seeing those trickle-down notes coming to better retail spend locally? Are we seeing development coming? And then, Alex, as a last question, I'll come back to you on the V&A about development. But from the two of you, are we seeing it in the industry? Are you seeing it from your retailers?
So it is a tough market, but I think where there is spend, there is also benefit. So if you look at Bayside, where you've just chosen to do a redevelopment, there's been new tenants added, consumers respond well to it. So the footfall trend of Bayside compared to the footfall trend of the other centres in that area saw a nice significant increase
in change, interest.
In change and interest. So as much as the market is tough, if you have the correct offering for the customers, so if you understand your core catchment properly in terms of which brand do they have highest affinity to in terms of your grocers, your apparel, your QSR, is the offering correct and are you talking to the market in the right manner, then you see footfall and turnovers increasing at the sites. So that is where we've seen shopping centres that are putting money into their offering and into their experience see the upside. Also in understanding your core catchment. So, gone are the days of getting one research report for your shopping centre and trusting that for the next 8 years. People move, demographics change, you have to constantly check, is the person shopping in the centre in line with the catchment area? So often when we look at shopping centres, we see under indexes in the affluent market.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to concentrate your effort, because you've got a risk of losing those shoppers to online international purchases. So I think it's just this consistent effort in servicing the customer, both in terms of offering and customer experience. And that's where those two drivers are really, I mean, it's very simple themes: convenience and consolidation.
And you commented about how a Gauteng customer would drive a further distance or experience more of the city in pursuit of its retail, whereas in Cape Town it seemed to be quite sectoral and defined by boundaries. And I have some sympathy with this, because a neighbor who lived next door to me for 5 years came to say goodbye with such emotion. I thought they were immigrating, but they were really just moving to Sea Point. And I live in Constantia, and I have never seen them again. So it is typical of this. Are Cape Town customers more loyal than Gauteng customers?
So I think you've got more concentrated core catchment areas. So especially for your community, super community, regional centres, you serve very nice local customer bases. And I think it's just about concentrating on that resident penetration in your core catchment. So often what we see, like...
I'm going to stop you there, because you landed on a point called concentrated markets, saturated. Now, I must just say that out of these three panelists, two of you have now easier jobs, Alex and Janine, because there's so much happening. Alex has the easiest job because he can't stop people going to the V&A. And that's pure concentration. And when you look at the V&A and you ask yourself a question in retail, is this a challengeable asset? And certainly, as being an owner of the Golden Acre, I would like to believe that it is. But cities change, Alex. They change with pressure. Many years ago, when I was but a young man, I traveled to Australia in the great effort to also stop them coming here. But I did a fantastic shopping experience in Darling Harbour, in that Sydney environment. And I went back later and I did it again. And then I went back a third time a year ago, only to find out it had been completely demolished in its regenerational refurbishment. Not because anything specifically bad, but it wanted to form greater connections. It wanted to form part of a bigger precinct, and it has an expression of a changing city in the marketing. Okay, look forward to see what it is. Could there be a time that the city of Cape Town, in its CBD and its environments, becomes such a competitor to the V&A that we could see those changes?
Yeah, great question. I think we don't see it as a competitor. That sounds very much like the old school.
Good Lord, you know, 53.
No, I think we see ourselves as much more part of the city. And I think in the past it was the city and the waterfront. I think all of our new developments, if you see what happened with Silo, if you see what we've done with the Battery Park and the Canal Side one, we're actually integrating into the city and trying to blend into those ones. You know, it is one of those ones, a rising tide will rise all boats. We have to work together, and you can't work at the behest of one or the other. A lot of the work has come in from there. Those transport infrastructure ones, we cannot turn our back on the city. So fundamentally, we're actually trying to make the routes easier. We're trying to make them more pedestrian friendly. We're trying to make life a lot easier and bring them together. So I think the only concentration one is actually densification, which goes back to then how do you, that's how you get the city to work with public transport, is you need a certain amount of densification to justify the numbers moving backwards and forwards.
I think if you look at the CBD frequency of visit in Cape Town as opposed to Gauteng, it was almost double.
Yeah.
So definitely an opportunity to leverage the high traffic coming into the city by working together rather than against.
I think you're quite right, Len. You've got to always focus on the amazing positiveness of what we've seen and how it's evolved. And I watch young teenagers and young adults pour into the city with families on First Thursdays and utilize the city. It's not a dead city. It's a very much alive city. It is different to many CBDs around there, and there's lots of life in it, and long may that last. And I think that is testament to how Cape Town is a step ahead of the game. I think, Alex, reading that case study on Darling Harbour was clear to me just how far the V&A has evolved into becoming a penetrative asset that adds value back to the CBD while living symbiotically off it. Are we going to see lots more hotels, given the tourism? Because when there's a mining in Durban, I can't fly to Joburg and no one can stay in a hotel here. Is it a big shortage? Janine, Eileen?
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental answer is yes. As tourism grows, it creates demand. You're going to keep seeing more of those coming through. We're attracting more international visitors. They like certain international flags, so expect to see further hotels. And as the demand grows, the market adjusts accordingly.
I've got one other question, and I'll open it up briefly to the floor again. Why would Amazon base their headquarters in Cape Town, which is a smaller part of our commercial centrality? What is it in their image of Cape Town that made it so attractive to base their start here and not in Gauteng? Does anyone have an answer from the panel? Janine? Alex?
You first.
I mean, for me, it's, again, Janine mentioned it earlier, it's, you know, we still consider ourselves Silicon Cape. There is a lot of tech support here. There's a lot of tech knowledge and really benefiting from that. So it's not as people heavy. It's also got a big call. The people heavy side is the call center, and that again we've got a big influx of call center people here, and then they need the tech side. So actually that's why it made more sense for it to be located here and service the rest of the country than the other way around. And equally, if you're shipping, it's probably easier to ship than to fly in. So another way of looking at it.
So these are coders. This is a connected network. It's infrastructure. It's labor. It's call center related. Are we becoming a smart city? Janine, are we moving in that direction?
There's aspirations to be a smart city, and there are various nodes. There's a smart city outside of Stellenbosch, which they're hoping to actually. There's definitely plans underway for that. It's been underway for a long time actually. In terms of that requires many people to collaborate and be on the same page as well, though. I think we also need to be very aware of, I think one of the things we always think of, what are the greatest challenges to Cape Town? And I'm not being a dampener, but in terms of, we've got to have, there's got to be equity in terms of the growth opportunities in that too as well.
Yes.
So that is something which I think one of the greatest threats to the province is poverty and inequality. But that's not unique to us. But in terms of growth has got to be inclusive. As well.
It cannot be at the expense of the greater good.
No.
We accept those things.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions from the floor?
The area around the railway station, that part of the city.
And that's not far from Golden Acre, if I'm correct, is an area where I feel that it would be amazing if they could clean up and uplift that whole area there. And the taxi ranks, and actually make something which is easier for the commuters and just link it beautifully to the city.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there are pockets where you can see opportunity, and that's certainly one that falls on that fringe of the CID to local government. That whole Grand Parade environment, it's got massive historic connection. Is that something talked about, Janine, Alex, on the city? Are you aware of it?
Gavin, sorry, maybe just from a City of Cape Town point of view, I know there's an initiative they've actually created a model for kiosks for vendors, which they're going to introduce to the area in front of the City Hall parade. But the idea is that they roll it out everywhere, and it costs like 11,000 rand, and everyone's going to have the same one. So the city is very much trying to actually do that, to control the vendors, to clean it up, to make it actually work better.
Look, and I think in the broader node, you're seeing some remarkable things on the student housing side. You're seeing some retail evolution in that zone. We know the trading densities are solid. You've seen a massive reflow of people back into the CBD post-COVID. It has a congestion, it has a hard living, it has a veil of security issues, and we've had homeless environments throughout Cape Town that the city, I think, has cautiously and responsibly tried to deal with it. I think those are all symptoms of urbanization. They're symptoms of these growths, and they are all elements that need consistent focus. I mean, there's just no doubt that the city will, over time, have to exploit its efficiency in management to make it a world-class city, and again, not at the expense of alienating people. I'm going to bring this morning's discussion to a close. Amanda, I think, are you going to hand over some gifts to our kind hosts and our speakers? I want to thank every one of you for participating. Ask once again that you give a round of applause to our guests. Thank you very much. Amanda's going to give you a small gift of appreciation from the council.
Thank you all very much.
Ladies first.
I'm sure you'll know where we're from.
Thank you.
Little token. Thank you so much.
Amanda. That's very necessary.
Thank you so much.
Aileen gets a tracker so we can monitor her. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you for a
everyone.
wonderful meal.